Hey everybody, this is Aaron the Pedantic. So today I wanted to do a video to kind of express why I am so adamant that DMs should be using random tables whenever they're running games. Now, one of the reasons that this became such an issue for me is just from just the experience of running games as a DM and feeling like there were so many situations where if I hadn't already put like exactly in paper, just cemented down, this is exactly what's here, what's here, what's here, what's here, what's here, and like work out all those kind of eventualities, then what ends up happening is that it starts to feel as though I am just kind of deciding on a whim what is going to be something that the players are going to deal with, how things are going to go, whether in their favor or against their favor. And I started to feel as if it felt insincere, as if I was basically being less of a referee who is impartial and trying to create this world where they get to play in, and more of someone who was kind of like catering specific types of encounters for them that were like my personal desire. So what I ended up doing was, I started like really getting into random tables and how to properly set them up and all those kinds of things. And I found that this randomization is such a fucking wonderful tool to try and basically remove this arbitrary decision making on the DM's part and making it something that is tailored to what is plausible for the place that you're dealing with, or what kind of falls within the realm of possibility. So one of the things that is probably something that a DM should really pick up quickly is that you use different roll methods to come up with different solutions to have different levels of probability. So obviously the one that we're most all probably familiar with is just like a D100 chart or a D20 chart, one where every single entry is something different. You have a different one for every number. So what that does, and this is something that's fairly obvious, but sometimes it takes a little bit of rubbing it into your brain for it to really bear fruit, is that that means that there's 5% chance on any of those D20 charts for any of those things to happen. They are equally likely. And that's something that a lot of times gets kind of swept under the rug. What you can do in order to change that, and by the way, obviously for the D100, each one would be 1%. What you can do to obviously try and fix that, or at least make it where the plausibility works out in a more realistic favor, is to either group them together. For instance, you can have like a 1 does this, but then like a 2 to 5 does this, and then a 6 to 15 does this, that kind of thing. That's how you group them all together so that you are cementing different, percentage chance for each of these things. Or, and one of the things is that's a perfectly legitimate way of doing that. But one of the things that has been used quite often in old school circles is the 2d6 chart. And if you look at the probability values that are being presented there, and I'm going to put a link in the description where I got that because that was not made by me. Basically, it obviously paints a very interesting spread of probabilities. As you can see, the kind of middle range there has just under a 17% chance of occurring. Which means that, it's not a whole lot more probable than the other things toward the middle there. So this is why this is a bell curve as opposed to a more linear progression. And the closer that you get to the margins, the less likely it is. So what this means is that you're a situation where more often than not, you're going to probably get between a 5 and a 9. More often than not, it's going to fall somewhere in that range. But then you can put some things kind of on the margins that are very unlikely, but it has like a nice curve to it that makes it more I don't know. It has a good range of probabilities. Is a good way of saying it. Being able to say, yeah, for my 12, there's a three, like just under a 3% chance for that to happen. Same thing with the 2. And one of the things that's a lot of fun to do for this is to try and come up with more positive things on the upper end and more negative things on the lower end. This is something that's reflected with the reaction roll chart for whenever you encounter monsters or NPCs in the field, to try and determine what their general outlook and persuasion is going to be toward the party. So what I did here is I kind of offered an example chart that someone might be able to use to get an idea of how you can put this into practice. So as you can see, this is basically a random encounter chart that might be appropriate for let's say a Kobold's cave, like their hideout. This would be a tribe of probably well over a few dozen kobolds, and they are going to have ogres in their employ. They're going to have some shamans. They're going to have sorcerers. They're going to have prisoners. They're going to have an inventor who's going to be setting up traps, probably more sophisticated traps than you might get otherwise. So what you do with this kind of thing is, obviously, whenever the players are sitting around too long, you give it a roll. So this roll should be every 20 minutes of game time, not real life time, game time. So usually there's so many things that they can do that's going to be like, all right, well, 20 minutes has passed, I'm going to do the roll. And then on a D6, you're like, okay, it is time for an encounter. So then you roll on this chart. So you roll 2d6. As you can see, all of your results are written in there. The most common thing that's going to happen is probably going to be, you're going to see some kobolds of some type. Okay, so you might see one of their inventors who is going to be checking up on the traps. You might see just like a patrol unit. You might see a small group. You might see like there's an 11% chance of just it being a single kobold that's just kind of looking around doing something. And as you can see, I have some nested tables built in where even more of the features are going to be determined. So basically, anytime that you roll on the 2d6 chart, you also roll a d4. So the d4 is going to help you find out which of these things is going to proc. So for instance, on the top end, you have basically a prison break occurring. So this is something that happens once, and then it's not going to happen for the rest of the time they're there. That's why it says cross off after. So what is going to happen is that D4 that you rolled for the extra detail is going to determine how long they're going to be distracted. So it's going to be anywhere from 10 to 40 minutes. That's what the D4 turns is. All right, so that is just something that can happen. So basically, it provides a sense of the place being alive and things, happening that aren't really dependent on what the players are doing. Obviously, what the players do is going to affect something else entirely. This is just completely like without the players fucking with anything. This is stuff that can just happen. Now, one of the things that might be kind of like what is the on the other end, if you roll a snake eyes, you're going to see there that there is basically what's going to happen is a faction attack. Now you might say, running the probabilities for there to be the possibility of a faction attack, 3% of the time, which is rolled every 20 minutes. But that's like what, 16% of the time you do this roll every 20 minutes. So like, even so, it would still be very bizarre for that to be something that could happen all that time. Yes, that is true. However, what you need to realize is that sometimes you put things in as a potential occurrence, even if the odds are kind of astronomical that it would happen right then, merely because otherwise you're going to have something that will probably never, ever, ever happen. And instead, you can have something that is very interesting that can happen very rarely. And that can make, like, entirely change the dynamic of what's going on. So as you can see, if you do happen to roll that, which there's only a 3% chance, remember that you only roll on this chart. Wow, I need to mute my shit. Sorry. But remember that you only are going to roll on that chart once every other round, and even then there's only a 1 in 6 chance that you end up rolling for an encounter. So that makes it quite rare indeed, but it is still something that could happen. If you think about it, if they're going through a cavern complex in a dungeon, there's probably going to be, I would say, at least 5, 6, 10, 20, somewhere in that rate. Like it could be any number of encounter checks that could happen. And so the likelihood of hitting certain things is pretty uncommon. But that being said, whenever they do happen, they're going to be interesting, unexpected. They're going to be something that's clearly not something that the DM just decided this is going to happen. It takes away that feeling of being railroaded, of being curated a particular adventure, all those kinds of things, and it adds more interesting components. So as you can see, what happens with the faction assault one is it's kind of random which group is going to want to attack, because typically whenever you're dealing with factions in a world that's highly chaotic and full of people fighting with each other and all those kinds of things, there's going to be a lot of different types of enemies. So it could be an orc warband that knows that there's a cave of kobolds there, and they say, you know what, we could definitely just go in and raid their shit. Get some food, get some weapons if necessary, and then move on. Well, that is going to seriously cause a dilemma for the player characters, and it's going to give them an opportunity to try and do some very interesting things. Do they try and avoid the orcs? Do they hide and let this thing play out and try and just kind of see what's left after they do their raid? Do they go ahead and help the kobolds fight the orcs? Do they help the orcs fight the kobolds? Is there a full-ass warband outside, or is this just a small scouting party? These are the kind of things that you've already created the process to determine this on the fly. So instead of you just deciding this is how it's going to be, you kind of let the world that you've created make that decision in a very natural way. And this is one of the things where if you're running in this type of way, you have to be okay with the possibility that you are going to roll on things. You should never put something on a table that you are basically going to want to ignore later, because either it's too dangerous and your players they aren't here for that kind of game. You're not running that kind of game. This isn't me trying to say this is how you should set up your tables with regard to lethality or anything like that. That's not at all the case, but just that you should take this. This is how you set up probabilities and use them in such a way that it makes your world feel fleshed out, and it keeps you from just being the person saying this is what happens, with everything. And so that is really my the reason that I wanted to highlight this. So there's a lot of other little options here and there that make it kind of interesting. So with a group of kobolds, there's a chance that they are distracted by something. So let's say you roll that up. What are they distracted by? Maybe they're having like a drinking party on the side whenever they're all getting drunk. Maybe they're making fun of one of the other kobolds. Maybe a fight's broken out among them. There could be any number of things, but what that does is it gives the PCs like something more than just group of kobolds, stuff like that. You want to try and add some more zest to the stuff going on, unless you're wanting to have to come up with something that adds more detail on the fly. Because if they're just ultimately, it's just a monster. It's just a monster. It's just a monster. Eventually, it starts running kind of dry. So that's why these nested tables are really useful, because then you can customize your random rolls, your random encounters to have additional components to them that make them fresh. Let's see, what else do we have here? I know I'm squinting. I need new glasses. So for the single kobold, there's a chance that they're squirreling away some gold. It's not terribly common. So again, this is only whenever you are going to roll random encounters and you decide that there is going to be a random encounter. After all of that, which again, it's not going to be terribly frequent, but it does keep the players moving. That's the important thing, because otherwise, how are you going to keep them moving? Are you just going to say, oh shit, something happens? If you do that, then you are just being arbitrary, and you should not be arbitrary. You should try to just to be fair, to be impartial, and to set up things in such a way that things keep moving constantly. Things are going to keep happening, but it's not because you're dangling the strings yourself. It's because you've made the machine, and the machine is churning things out. Anyway, so the single kobold is a 11% chance on here. So 1 in 10, 1 in 9 kind of thing. And even then, there is a 25% chance whenever that comes up that they are squirreling away some gold. So, there's a chance that the group might come across this kobold who happened to pull some things out of their treasury and is trying to dig up a little spot and hide it somewhere. So this gives you, okay, well, now I know this kobold is coming through and they're going to go in this room. Does everybody hide? Yes, they hide. Okay. So it is going to go into the corner. It's going to start digging. You can hear the digging noise. Do they interrupt? Do they, what do they do? Eventually they see he's, like putting down some, like a bag of coins, or maybe some coins, probably a bag of coins, I would say. Drops them in, starts piling it up. This whole time, they have the opportunity to interact with this thing. Maybe they capture it and, get it for information. I put on another thing here that is a potential informant. So this is somebody who has had the ever-loving shit beaten out of them, has been told to leave the place. This could be for any number of reasons. This is something that you can come up with on the fly. And it could be just a kobold. There's a 75% chance that it's going to be a kobold, and there's a 25% chance that it's going to be one of these ogres. And one of the things that you'll want to do if you're really trying to capture, I guess, like a simulationist perspective, is that whenever you, basically all of these things that are on here are going to be already written into the dungeon itself. So whenever you kill one, you cross it off. It's not in that area anymore. It went off somewhere else. It's been killed. This isn't like a perpetual machine of new creatures that you deal with. So, and this is something that you use for everything. You would use this kind of table for wilderness travel. If you didn't want to do a thorough hex map with every single detail, mapped out, then you can very easily have okay, it's this number for water sources. It's this number for for food sources. What kind of food source is it? That's another table. So maybe it's, like a predator creature. Maybe it is like a nest of eggs, those kinds of things. And so you can do all those things. And that way you can constantly have the players have something interesting to deal with all the time that they can decide how they want to approach. That's the goal. The goal is to present them with these opportunities without trying to just be a storyteller. So I hope that this was helpful. A lot of people are probably preaching to the choir about, you've probably been doing stuff like this for a long time. So in that case, I apologize. But sometimes it's fun to be preached to, being the choir, I guess. Anyways, that's it for today. I have kind of a goofy video that's going to be coming up soon. with the help of Chelsea, because I'm going to need somebody to handle the camera and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's it. Have a wonderful day. Take care.